Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our SFC podcast. I'm Zoo, your host, and today we have JR Miller. JR currently works at Volley in strategic finance. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, my name's JR. Born and raised in Los Angeles. Went to school at USC, and currently working at Volley. I joined as employee number 20, I believe. Um, and yeah, I've been there for about 4 years. It's been great.
Nice. I didn't realize, JR, that you were such an early employee. How many employees now at Volley?
Including contractors, we're at about 100.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. And I guess, in 30 seconds to a minute, what does Volley do?
Volley is the leading creator of voice-first video games. So you can think interactive entertainment. We make games for starting with Alexa, and then now we're moving to TVs and mobile.
Oh, very interesting. Cool. Well, I took a look at your background. You have a very genuine and interesting background, unlike some of the folks we talked to. You started your career in software engineering and you ended up in strategic finance. A lot of the folks we talked to either started in, banking, consulting, accounting, trading, etc., and then they moved into StratFin. So, yeah, why don't you tell our viewers like how that happened?
Yeah, so I have kind of a funny origin story, I guess you could say. I started when I was in high school, actually cleaning out a lab at UCLA, like literally volunteer work. They were creating a VR studio, so moving furniture around and whatever, and got to be good friends with some of the postdocs and PhDs that worked in the lab, and they kind of set me on the path of learning how to program, and yeah, started there. I liked being a software engineer, but I think that the lab environment wasn't really best suited for my kind of social skill set. Like I really like to be around people and everything like that. So I decided to make the jump. I went over, did a quick stint at a venture capital firm here in Venice called Amplify. Um, and we were the investors in Volley's pre-seed round. So I was able to meet our CEO and CTO and kind of build a connection there, and then eventually jumped on as their first finance hire.
Oh wow, that's a really cool way to get into StratFin. So while let's start a little bit with your engineering stuff. What kind of language or what kind of coding language did you use or did you learn? I'm very interested to see how you leverage that plus all your other skills to first land at Amplify and then go to Volley.
Yeah, so data stuff. If you're in a lab heavy environment, you're going to see some of the classic like R, and like that's basically where I started, right? And then
Okay.
jumped into Python, as well as because they had some VR emphasis for some of the papers that they were working on there. Actually, C sharp, which
Okay.
was kind of like the underlying for Unity at the time. So we were using Unity and building an engine to kind of do some VR body dysmorphia studies. So that C sharp and kind of the 3D stuff, I haven't touched at Volley because obviously I'm not an engineer anymore.
Uh-huh.
But it's good to have the understanding, especially like being in video games and understanding how game engines work. Um,
Right.
so
Um, Okay, and so how did you take the coding and that language to Amplify? Like how'd you break into VC?
Well, I actually had a friend who worked at Amplify, and I mean, it's their pre-seed fund, so obviously it's not as focused on like the heavy finance side of things.
Right.
So it was a good way to intro myself and kind of learn about the
Exactly.
business without having to be like previous investment banker or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so shout out to Connor and Eric at Amplify. They
I mean I get that question, but we also get the question a lot. How do you break into these unique sort of roles? And you always see the classic backgrounds, right? Like MBA or business school, and then cool VC or PE, and then some sort of like StratFin tech shop. But yeah, we love stories like this because you kind of write your own destiny. You liked coding, you did some coding stuff and some engineering work, you used your network and then got into a pre-seed VC, and then you went straight to one of their portfolio companies.
yep.
Yeah, I love it. We love it. Cool. So you've now been at Volley for about 4 years. um, uh, Over the 4 years, from the StratFin perspective, walk us through kind of like how like your role has changed, or maybe start with kind of like what your role is like today, and maybe how it's changed over the past 4 years. Because um, like any tech startup, the finance function will change. It'll involve strategic finance is new, right? Like this function didn't really exist, like what, 10 plus years ago. So yeah, what does it look like today, and how has it kind of evolved over the past 4 years?
Yeah, I think I like to describe it like in stages, right? When I joined so early on, there's no possible way that you could build like a functional operating model that is going to be predictive of anything in the future, right? There's too many variables um, to really look out 3 or 4 years and say like we think that we're pretty confident revenue is going to be X and costs are going to be Y, right? Like this, it's not really worth doing when you're pre-revenue.
Right.
So early on, I think a lot of what I was doing is kind of building the foundation for kind of revenue creation. I think in consumer, uh, you try to evaluate a lot of these opportunities, and when you're limited with the cash that you get from an early fundraise, then you have to be really strategic in looking at market opportunity and what is going to set you on the best path to get you to that initial revenue. So we did a lot of IP licensing and trying to get stuff that really put our name forward and said, hey, we have some legitimacy as a company, right? So that was like signing deals to get Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader and Jeopardy as like our initial kind of big headline titles. And then, yeah, from there, I think once you start to bring some of the revenue in and, nail down some of the forecasting, the function has sort of evolved into a more traditional, full finance team and all of the functions that you would imagine within that. So
Okay. So let's touch on a little bit in the early stage. You said, there's no real revenue and forecasting to be done. So very much like playing almost like an operator role, where you're helping drive certain business decisions, like you said, the fundraising and stuff like that, off of some of these models that you are building, right? So maybe give the viewers a little bit of an example of what like the first 6 months like on your laptop or on your computer look like. You weren't building three statement financial models, right? You were building maybe operating models or IP models. Like, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I think like for me, the key was actually, this is a funny story. When I first started at Volley, I think that my initial like interview process, I did already know the team a bit, but they were like, can you kind of build us, like you said, like an operating model or a revenue model for the company for your interview? Just like a 2 hour, just full send and see what happens. And when I started there, I kind of asked, okay, what kind of models do we have? What kind of data is available? And the team was like, I think you guys should probably just start with what you built in your interview because that's like we don't really have anyone doing anything like that. So it was like really clean slate. Um, but the key there was really like,
So
can we
you crushed the
build?
interview is what you're saying.
I think more so it was a need based type of thing, right?
I agree.
But I think that the real value there was like, okay, I'm going to build a revenue model that in the first 6 months that goes as deep as possible into all the data that we can collect from our users and then look at like what are the levers that we can pull in the next year to 2 years that are going to move this business forward as fast as possible and then try to create a strategy on the back end um, that would be focused on pulling those levers.
Love it. I literally think you just defined strategic finance in like 10 seconds.
Great.
So now let's fast forward a little bit to like today. So on those levers, how do you go about one finding those levers? Because you have a full StratFin team now, right? So you probably have a little bit of a FP&A role. You probably have maybe some fundraising, some board related work. So do you still focus more on the operation side, like with those levers and growth levers and trying to unlock value, or do you sit more on like maybe the board side or the fundraising side, or are you still kind of like all like across the whole function?
We're still small. It's still three of us, so we
Oh, okay.
touch
So
everything.
you're doing everything.
We try to do it as lean as possible. But yeah, there's definitely fundraising prep when it happens, board materials for board meetings, and then obviously again being in consumer marketing is like a very heavy collaboration with the finance side.
Yep.
Tons of data that goes into it, and by far, one of the most important things in the business model. So heavy partnership on marketing as well.
Oh, I think I lost you. Oh, you're back. There we go. you can hear me? Oh, good. You mentioned consumer marketing. That's what I actually do at Tala. I focus very much on our growth and acquisition side. I've done a whole lot of math and teaching around CAC and marginal cost of acquisition, lifetime value, marginal lifetime value. I love all that stuff. Um, You've probably interacted with other folks from other companies, maybe not in strategic finance, maybe in FP&A, or maybe in accounting. Do you have any thoughts? You don't have to have thoughts, but do you have any thoughts on how strategic finance is different from FP&A? Because some of the stuff that we see is the skill set required for StratFin, including modeling, including SQL, including some now even programming, is different from FP&A. But there's also this higher demand of folks to jump into StratFin because it's this more entrepreneurial, like operating mind role versus kind of like your just reporting role. But you've been in the role for 4 years. Want to kind of hear your thoughts on the differences?
Yeah, I think it's very different at every company, right? I think there isn't a defined right way to do things in most of the cases, right? So I do touch FP&A. I do a lot of that work as well,
Right.
because we have a small team. And I think just depending on where you are in your timeline and kind of the special circumstances of your business, it's gonna be very different. I think sector is also kind of critical. Um, Consumer is nice because we have a lot of opportunities to do some very unique stuff,
Right.
which wouldn't necessarily be the case if you're working on like the cost side at a foundation models company, right? Where you're heavily focused on just optimizing for that.
Correct. Okay. Couple of more questions, and this doesn't have to be specific to Volley, but and maybe you can use your insights and knowledge from Volley. But what do you think happens to a company if you remove the strategic finance team?
I mean, the engine of any company is its products, right? And like, I don't want to take away from our product team and our engineering team. They do a fantastic job.
Yep.
And in the best case, your product to an extent can sell itself, right? Um, I think the insights that you gain from working in StratFin really, um, basically can help accelerate your timeline and also to preserve cash and really focus your investments. I think that a lot of times product teams focus on metrics that are good for their user base and good for the experience on the product, but aren't necessarily aligned with the financial goals and long term vision of like whatever IPO or selling. Um, and
Yeah.
without that, I think that you can run into some issues where, like, I think Clubhouse is a great example. A really interesting product, kind of top tier engineering team, and insanely massive growth and user growth chart, right? But and I don't know anyone on the finance team there, but like their entire vision was optimized for like let's get a 100 million people on this thing,
Yeah.
without really that long term thinking about what's going on. So I
Um,
don't doubt that they have really smart people on the finance team at Clubhouse too, but
yeah, you're right. It's there's lots of these situations, especially in today's world where capital is scarce. It's tough to get capital, right? We're not in the zero interest rate environment, unfortunately. And yeah, I want to kind of paraphrase what you said because I think you put it really well, which is, your product would still exist. The quality of your product would still probably be very, very good and sell itself, but the longevity of the product and the profitability of the product may actually not exist or may not actually go into perpetuity without like a solid, StratFin sort of function. I actually ask this question a lot in interviews because I want to understand how candidates think about what their impact would be at the company. Um, I think an answer along the lines of like, oh, the product would break is a little bit extreme.
yeah.
I also like your point though that depending on the industry, the StratFin team can have an impact on the product, right? The data you guys pull, the decisions on metrics, what to focus on, and the balance, right? Of course, like Clubhouse, you can get 100 million users, but then you may struggle. Specifically at Tala, we're a lending app, right? So we do microfinance, so the product is money. Um, there's a lot of insights that the StratFin team can help the product decide what to do next, what features to roll out, and things like that. What's one thing, like in your 4 years, what's one thing you don't like about the role? And again, it doesn't have to be a volley, just in general. What's one thing you say, it's not fun about strategic finance?
I'm going to give an answer that may not apply to me as much, but I think people should be aware from if
Yeah,
they're
sure.
thinking about switching their career path is like, this is sector dependent again, but it's a very data heavy profession. And I think people might not realize that. And I think when you think data, you're like, oh, great, I'm great at SQL and whatever. But in reality, like nothing is going to come structured. Everything is going to be broken at the beginning. Like it takes a lot of work to get your data pipeline in a place where you can actually even start doing the job, right? I like those problems. I think they're fascinating to think about how you structure data and what you collect and how that's going to go into your decision making process. But like it's going to be messy at the beginning. Um, all great companies are, so I think that it's a big consideration.
Yep, couldn't agree more. This is why at SFC we also teach everything about data. We show a little bit of a data map, how things work. We do teach SQL, but knowing how to query is one thing. Then knowing how all the data and the databases work together, how you can pull it into your Google Sheet models, how you can pull it into Looker and things like that, are all super important. I know we're getting close to
No
time.
problem.
You came from a software engineering background. What are some tips you may have for people who are software engineers and maybe wanting to do a pivot in their career, or maybe they're interested in now strategic finance? What's some of the tips you may have for folks in that bucket?
Yeah, I think that I really like to look at honestly both software engineering and finance is like a tool. I don't consider myself a finance guy or a software engineer. Like I think those are things that I've learned that are pretty cut and dry. It's like you can learn them by reading a book or a textbook or watching YouTube videos or whatever. Um, and I think like the most critical thing is like a learn those skills and get good at them, right? And then B um, is develop domain expertise. I don't think that you're going to have nearly as much success in a career in strategic finance or really in startups at all unless you're very well read and passionate about the domain that you're working in. And I think it really lends a lot of power to your day to day success. I'm not the biggest gamer growing up, but I have always enjoyed games and I know a lot about the industry. And I think that like it helps you know what to look for. And so basically, like, can you demonstrate that you're perfectly proficient in both finance and whatever technical skills you need? And then why are you the right person for a gaming company or for a fintech company? Right. I think that's almost more important. It might not necessarily be more important in the interview process, but in terms of your success in the role, it's more.
Love it. Love that answer. Just before we end, GR, you live in LA, just like myself. What's one fun fact about you? What's one thing you like to do? You like to game outside of the office. What do you like to do?
I love golf. I've been a golfer since I was a little kid. I play
Oh
all
wow,
the
me too.
time. Yeah, so we'll have to get out there at some point.
Where do you know? I actually stopped playing when I was what? I stopped playing about 10 years ago. I played relatively competitive. I would shoot low 70s, mid 70s. Are you in that ballpark? Do you play pretty competitive as well?
Yeah, yeah, just around there, and I think it's a great way. I almost use it like as a friend thing, but also as like a meditation thing. It's like you get so zoned in, and I try to get out there almost every day and either putt or chip or practice. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
great.
Wow. Good for you. The last time I swung a golf club on a course was probably 10 or 11 years ago. I've done top golf a little bit, but
Got to get back out there.
I'll definitely have to practice before I take you out on a round. GR, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming here. I've learned a lot. I've just learned a lot. Just want to say thank you one more time.
No problem. Thanks, Ben.
All right, we'll see you soon. All right, let me pause this.